You know, Stan used to be with SPC, and he worked for Senator Specter and others. He's been around. We're all familiar with him. So, Stan, we're anxious to hear your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. And actually, speaking of all of this new transformative technology, one of the first times I was here at California University many years ago with Senator Specter was with Hyperloop. So there's a lot of discussion about, this was when California was looking at a Hyperloop demonstration here. And so I'll talk about this a little bit later in my presentations. I'm sorry, Hyperloop, the underlying Hyperloop technology of maglev. And so this was, I had spent probably about 20 years working in the world of maglev, but that's still the underlying technology within the vacuum tube of the Hyperloop. But they were looking at maglev deployment here and as a pilot deployment. So that just goes to show, and I'll talk about this in some of the other remarks, that there's a lot of non-urban applications as well. But I appreciate the invitation from Jim to come down here today. Justin Ehrlich was scheduled to come down from Uber, but Uber's got a lot going on right now with the fatality in Tempe, and the whole industry is really kind of reeling from that. And I can talk a little bit about a lot of this disruptive technology, but what I want to focus on today is kind of what's happening here in our region and how can we position ourselves for looking at this within the planning aspect. And I commend Jim and SPC for really looking at taking this kind of head on. We can't plan for it. That's one thing. We can't really just take a snapshot in time and say, we know what technology is going to be here in 5 years or in 2 years or in 10 years. But what we need to do is look at it more of kind of a value proposition. Just like when you're doing your planning, you're saying, we want to make sure that we're fiscally constrained, or we want to make sure that we're being sustainable. You want to make sure that you're looking at technology and all the different implications it might have. So I would look at it that way, as opposed to saying we're actually going to try to predict this technology and try to get ahead of it, because I don't think any regions or cities ever will. You just have to keep it involved with your whole planning process. So, of course, this is a very revolutionary time in transportation, and we're also going to talk today from the economic development side. But we're looking at the connected vehicle technology, the automated vehicle technology, the shared use technology with the transportation networks, also the alternative fuels like the electric vehicles or natural gas vehicles, and then of course the alternative technologies, things like the hyperloops or drones. So we're not dealing with one disruptive technology. We're dealing with all these multiple technologies happening at different times, but they're all converging at once. And so the big question is, why now? We've been talking about autonomous vehicles actually since about 1937 was the first proposed autonomous vehicle. But why is this all happening now? We're looking at all the data that we're getting from all the sensors in the field. And so we'll get into some of this with the Internet of Things. But essentially, our smartphones that we're all carrying around, we're becoming mobile sensors, and we're collecting data and transmitting data. And there's lots of data within our vehicles, within our building systems. All these sensors are inexpensive and becoming prolific, and so there's lots of data being collected. The second thing is the advanced computing. So again, the advanced computing within our vehicles, within our phones, within our buildings. There's computing all around, and it's becoming relatively inexpensive, and so you have lots of computing and lots of sensors. And then you have the advanced wireless, which essentially is connecting the data from those sensors and that computing and moving it around, especially, we heard a lot earlier today, from the broadband, but getting into this 5G and advanced wireless, this is going to be extremely disruptive, because what this does is this connects all of these systems together. And this is what we get into when we call the Internet of Things. So all of a sudden, our vehicles are talking to each other, our appliances are talking to each other, our phones are talking to each other. All these systems are talking to each other without us even have to be involved in the loop. And what that does is that allows a lot of different applications that we're not even considering today that will, just like before we had smartphones, we didn't understand all the applications that our smartphones could have done even 5 years ago. So we're going to see this all emerge, particularly when 5G comes out around 2020. That's when we're going to see a lot of this come to fruition, and we got to try to understand how we can take advantage of the benefits, but then also mitigate the problems that come along with that. And so we also looking at, why southwestern Pennsylvania? Why is this happening here, and why is this happening within the region? And again, this goes back to looking at the mega region as well. Outside, looking at all the way from New York to Chicago, but placing us in the middle of that. So this is an early application of some of our advanced, this was our first connected vehicle technology deployment. This was the adaptive signal system that was deployed starting in 2012 in the city of Pittsburgh in the East Liberty neighborhood with 9 traffic signals. It's expanded since to 50 traffic signals, 25 of them having the connected vehicle technology of the dedicated short-range communication, which allows vehicles to talk to vehicles and vehicles to talk to the infrastructure. This was the first decentralized adaptive signal system in the world, and still the most advanced, because what it does is each intersection of these 50 intersections has a computer, and so each intersection is using machine learning to make its own decisions on how long the signal should be red or green. And then also they're communicating with each other, and then also have the ability to communicate with the vehicles as well. We're talking with the Port Authority of Allegheny County on equipping buses with the radios to allow the signals to coordinate with the buses. We already have some of our vehicles equipped with these. We're doing a project where we're equipping pedestrians, disabled pedestrians, particularly blind pedestrians, with smartphones that can talk to the intersections as well. So lots of neat applications, but again, based on you have sensors out there, you have computers out there, and you have communications out there. So it enables all these interesting applications. So what we did with that was when Pittsburgh applied for the Smart City Challenge and came in as a runner-up to Columbus, the city of Pittsburgh took these 50 intersections and said, we're going to expand it to another 150 on top of that. And so they did win a subsequent award through the ATC MTD program, and with the support of PennDOT, putting together a $30 million package to really build on that smart adaptive signal technology and build into what the city of Pittsburgh is calling the smart spines deployment, which will also include deployment of the applications for the hopefully new bus rapid transit system as well. So again, building off of one layer of technology onto another layer of technology is really how southwestern Pennsylvania, kind of from a connected vehicle technology standpoint, really started to build a test bed in this area. Also, we have deployments in Cranberry Township and some other areas in Allegheny County with this connected vehicle technology. From an autonomous vehicle technology, we've actually, Pittsburgh's been the birthplace of autonomous vehicles starting in the 1980s. 1984 was the first autonomous vehicle, and this just demonstrates the timeline all the way through 2007, whenever the picture on top is the 2007 DARPA Urban Grand Challenge winner. This was a Department of Defense competition for an autonomous vehicle that could operate 60 miles in a simulated urban environment. And we won that in 2007 with that vehicle, but then you see below it is a 2011 vehicle, which is one of our current prototypes. and just how that changed from everything being exposed on the exterior of the vehicle with all those sensors. And again, these are all those sensors that we're talking about today, but that's back when they were all defense grade sensors and very expensive. Now you have that all integrated into the vehicle, a lot less expensive, and again, integrated in, not at defense grade, but at auto grade. And then we get into some of these other earlier applications that we're seeing now. These are the autonomous shuttles are out there. This was actually me traveling in one of these autonomous shuttles. This was big news back in 2015. I was in Bordeaux, France, traveling around with these in traffic, making left-hand turns in traffic, going about 20 miles an hour. And again, this was all big news at that time, but now these are becoming very common. We have full deployments of vehicles like this in many cities in many countries, and in the U.S. Las Vegas has one of these operating on the road now. And again, this is a full level 5 vehicle with no driver, no steering wheel, no pedals, but one of these things we're seeing on the road today. Another area that we're seeing coming soon is this platooning, where trucks are able to communicate with each other through connected vehicle technology, and now potentially through autonomous vehicle technology, in order to drive closer together on the highway and get the direct benefit of fuel savings from drafting. And so we're starting to see that already come to fruition, but you can, even without any automation, just through the connected vehicle technology, this enables anywhere from about 12% savings in fuel costs. So right now, even without automation, there's a lot of benefits to that, even when you have drivers in the vehicles. And then at the same time, just 3 or 4 weeks ago, we saw Uber's autonomous trucking company had just announced deployment in I believe Atlanta, and then Waymo announced deployment of their autonomous truck in Phoenix. So we're seeing a lot coming from the trucking industry as well. But that's where we're seeing these first deployments, is in fleet vehicles. So the autonomous shuttles, the autonomous or platooning trucks, and then third, of course, is the vehicles themselves, like the Uber vehicles that were, of course, Pittsburgh was the first public deployment of an autonomous taxi fleet, but now we're seeing that in San Francisco and Phoenix and Atlanta and a lot of other areas. This was referred to earlier today as well. I think Eric brought up there's funding now for these autonomous vehicle proving grounds. This is a PennDOT slide, but there were 10 autonomous proving grounds selected all over the United States, but Pennsylvania was one of them, and that includes sites in State College and in Pittsburgh. So what else we have going on here is, back to William's point of the mega region and what's happening in the whole mega region. About 2 years ago, we started saying, okay, we have these autonomous vehicles on test tracks. Now we have them out on the roads testing. But what's the next thing we have to start looking at? What's the next frontier from a research side? And we said, we really need to look at, if we're going to get full-scale deployment of connected and automated vehicle technology, we need to have a true multi-state connected and automated vehicle test bed. And so we really wanted to look at, again, New York to Chicago, but starting with Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan. So we got together with our partners at Ohio State and University of Michigan and said, all right, let's talk to each of our state DOTs. They were very receptive, but they were looking at it not, again, just from the transportation side, but the states are very interested in this from an economic development side. So about a year ago, the Smart Belt Coalition was born, and this is a coalition of Michigan DOT, Ohio Turnpike, Ohio DOT, PennDOT, and the Pennsylvania Turnpike, along with universities in the 3 states and proving grounds in the 3 states. And so what we want to do is really look at the activity that's happening in the cities like Columbus and in Pittsburgh, Ann Arbor, and Detroit, investments in some of this technology and investments in some of this infrastructure, but then also tie that to the turnpikes and the highways and the over-the-road infrastructure and really look at, okay, if we're going to start investing in this, whether it's from a regional side or a city side or from a state side, how can we make sure that these systems are interoperable? And so this group has come together, and they're already looking at truck platooning and work zone notifications as major initiatives. That's in one. Eric brought up, two things these companies need. One is they need good roads with good markings so that the vehicles can operate safely on them. But another one that's really interesting is the road closure information. Right now, they're all working off of these mapping systems, and there's actually a lot of big competition in the digital mapping world for this technology. But if a road is closed, either from a planned construction or an accident or something like that, those vehicles need to know immediately. There needs to be some type of integrated system where all that information can be pushed out to all these mapping companies and auto companies that they know that this mile of road is closed right now and you've got to go somewhere else. So these are ways that agencies can, you're never going to get ahead of the technology, but how can you plan for that in your operations and your planning? So and again, Smart Belt Coalition is a play off of Rust Belt. We're no longer the Rust Belt, we're the Smart Belt. And we're still looking at, the next kind of frontier in a lot of this technology is really looking at, continuing this connected and automated vehicle technology research. Because right now, as we saw from the fatality in Tempe, that there's still a lot of technological challenges. We've got to make sure that this is being deployed safely. We need to make sure that policies are in effect. So that's one of the things the Smart Belt Coalition is really looking at, both from a local and state and regional policy perspective. What are the policies you need to have in place to make sure that the technology, again, is happening safely, but also being deployed in a way that we're getting the economic development benefit here as opposed to, some other country or some other region of the United States. We're also looking at, we have a center called the Center for the Future of Work that is developed out of this, because we're seeing and this isn't just for automated vehicle technology, but automation in general is really changing the face of work. So how can we adjust what are some of the policies we can put in place to mitigate some of the impacts of the work disruption that will happen from this? The Smart Mobility Challenge is a challenge that we put forward, $400,000 challenge we put forward last year, that in cooperation with both SPC and PennDOT was to look at how can this benefit not just urban areas, but non-urban areas as well. And so we put out a challenge to municipalities in the whole 10-county region. We had 20 responses back from 8 counties and ended up funding 8 projects in 4 counties within the region to kind of show here's how this technology can benefit suburban and rural counties as well. And again, the advanced wireless, I can't emphasize that enough. The advanced wireless is really going to change the game on a lot of this. So we had a lot of discussion about that earlier, but keep that in mind. And then we just kicked off our Metro 21 Smart Cities Institute, which is looking at not just smart transportation, but as I mentioned before, smart building systems, smart water and sewer systems, smart utilities, smart power. All these systems, we're just seeing transportation come as kind of the tip of the spear, but this advanced wireless and advanced technology and sensors and edge computing, it's disrupting all these others as well. So we've got to be looking at smart cities in general, not just smart transportation or smart water in a vacuum, something like that. And again, back to the company side of this, we have one of the biggest natural organic industry clusters around this just in our region, with all of these companies in Pittsburgh, ones like Argo AI, Aurora, Uber and Google and all of them. But when you tie it into the ones also that are developing in Columbus and Detroit and all these other areas, you really are seeing this significant industry cluster growing around this. So we have to look at it as economic development at the same time. But again, how do we ensure safety but enable innovation? probably out of time for questions,
Well, yeah,
but
about 5 minutes ago, but that's all right. I'm just kidding.
this could.
Stan, we were joking. Stan used to work for us. So
But the idea was this was just to kind of spark some of the conversation for your table conversations after. So I'll be around for if you have any table questions.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Stan.
Thanks.